There are a lot of different ways to offer fitness to your clients, but in most cases, group options are better for the business and they're better for your clients. But class-based and small group personal training models are very different businesses. So in this video, they are going to face off and I will break down the strengths and challenges of each model.
Fight!
My name is Mark Fisher, and if you like today's video, head over to businessforunicorns.com where you'll find out more about how we help training gym owners create more income, more impact, and more freedom.
In today's classes for Small Group Personal Training Ultimate Showdown.
The first thing we need to do is define these because people use these terms, and I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about what they mean. So when I say class-based, I'm referring to group fitness offerings that can accommodate up to 15, ideally 20, sometimes even 50 people in a session with a single coach. From a programming perspective, this model often employs generalized all-skate programming with some variations, progressions here and there. It's often high-intensity interval training, and it's sometimes, but not always, specific implement-based. So this is to say, a rowing class or the class focused on treadmills. On the other hand, when I'm talking about small group personal training, I'm talking about a limit of no more than 6 clients per coach per session. From a programming perspective, this model, although usually based off templates, allows for a lot more customization and individualization of the exercise variation for each of the clients. There's more opportunity for everyone to run their own race from a programming perspective. In this model, there may or may not be the tracking of progressive overload, which is to say, depending on the particular implementation of this model, sometimes there is an app or some sort of software platform or sometimes even paper that allows the clients to track increases in load and reps over time. I think there is benefit to both of these models, and I think there's challenges to both. So what I want to do is I want to talk through what I perceive to be the pros of each of these approaches. First contendant, classes.
Fight!
So first of all, with classes, you'll get to offer things at a lower price point. If you're looking at an unlimited option or maybe a 3 times a week option, this is going to be earmarked anywhere from $150 up to $200 to, if you're in metropolitan markets, sometimes in excess of $300. Now, while that's not cheap as compared to one-on-one training or the types of dollars you can command for small group personal training, it is a little bit more financially accessible for more people. So it's one of the things that's valuable about it. Additionally, classes tend to have an experience that really has a lot of pizzazz, a lot of sex appeal for a lot of consumers. Classes tend to be set up in a way, particularly because of the way they're run, to allow for more of that group experience. You can also play with lights, music, mise-en-scene in a way that's a little bit more organic, whereas small group, although fantastic in many ways, tends to be more like a bunch of people doing personal training together in the same room. Another pro for classes, you can sometimes fit in a lot of people in a relatively small square footage, and depending on the type of value you create, you can charge a decent price per class per person. So if you do the math, if you're getting, let's say 35 people in there per class and they're paying an average of sometimes $20, sometimes $30 per hour, that's not a bad hourly take for the business. Another benefit is scheduling tends to be easier because of this capacity, right? So obviously, if you have, let's call it 30 spots in your Monday at 6:30 p.m. class time, it's easier for your clients to schedule in than if you only have 6. Another benefit of class, it's a better fit for high energy performer coaches. So this is another consideration. The types of coaches that tend to thrive in the class-based boutique fitness experience-focused model tend to be different than the ones that do well in the smaller group personal training model, which tends to be a little bit more focused on technique. Another pro of that for the owner and for the business is it's a little bit easier to onboard people because you're not dealing with the minutia of a kettlebell clean or the nuances of a Turkish get up. I'm a nerd. I love those. I think there's absolutely place for that. But when you only need to train your coach, it's like, all right, great, everybody. Cool, turn up your treadmills and go faster. You know, they can focus on other things and you can prioritize a little bit more personality. Can they do that rock star preacher comedian situation, which can be very attractive and very entertaining. And finally, and admittedly this is a challenge as well as a strength, you can have a more robust layer of management. And what that means is the owner, it insulates you from one of your 2 staff members leaving and suddenly you're back on the floor 25 hours per week because you need to fill in. Now, as I mentioned, that's also a challenge in some ways because there's a lot of headaches and a lot of payroll costs that go along with having that level of management. Having said that, if you want to find out a little bit more about how to insulate yourself so you're not always dragged back into the business, be sure to check out my video, Your Must Hire for Your Training Gym. Click the link below in the description. And while you're there, if it pleases you, my liege, why don't you hit subscribe? And then more people can find out about our channel. Now, let's talk about the pros of small group personal training. Small group personal training, competitor.
Fight!
So small group personal training, you're gonna have a lot higher revenue per member. So maybe it's not gonna be as accessible, but instead of $150, $200, maybe $300, you're gonna average in most markets around $300, maybe $350, maybe even in excess of $500 per month. The advantage here is when you're doing those kinds of numbers, you just need a lot less total clients for the facility to be successful. And not only that, but as compared to class-based concepts, small group personal training tends to be a lot stickier from a retention perspective. So across the industry, if you're looking at class-based concepts, you're looking at 8 to 10% average month-over-month churn. Small group personal training, you're gonna see 5% tends to be a bare minimum, and there are facilities that go as low in a given month as 3%. But the reality is class-based concepts as a rule, they're just not as sticky. You also tend to attract a slightly younger, more transient, polyamorous fitness consumer. And 2 other benefits of having a smaller number of clients to be financially successful is it just allows for a higher touch customer service. So the small group personal training, it's just less ducks for you to have to keep an eye on. And finally, on the one hand, you have a more robust layer of management, which in theory can insulate you more, but it also could be more of a headache. Small group personal training, of course, is the inversion. You're not as insulated, but you can run a leaner business, particularly if you like being on the floor, which now, frankly, you have probably more time and bandwidth for because you don't have to be quite the marketing powerhouse you have to be in the other model. It means your payroll is going to be smaller, your making your nut is going to be easier, you have less people on your team for you to manage and keep in line with your standard operating procedures. So there's a lot to commend for a smaller, lighter, leaner boat. Well, there you have it, friends. That is the showdown. That is the challenge between class-based concepts and small group personal training. Now, which one is the best? It's up to you. I don't think one is necessarily better than the other. I will say this, in a vacuum, if you look at the industry during the pandy, the class-based concepts got beat up, the small group concepts, and any concept that could shift to one-on-one did a little bit better. Now, we're coming out of the pandy, thankfully. And the reality is the class-based concepts, one might say, are still a little bit easier to scale from a certain perspective, but at the same time, there's probably more white space in the small group training world because there's not as much of that being offered, at least not at scale. If you want to find out more about why I chose to invest in a fitness franchise that is small group personal training, you want to go to the description block below and click the link to learn more. And while you're there, hit subscribe. Do it. All right, friends, I hope this video was helpful as you consider the pros and cons of these various models. I will check you next time for another video where I will share with you more actionable tips, psychological frameworks, and philosophy.